Yeah, we do need a ring light. It's dark in here. What up, guys? So I wanted to come on here and just chit chat real quick about this whole conversation that's been kind of going around lately around one, what community development is, how you build community, what that actually looks like, and two, how do you achieve community development without spurring the negative impacts of gentrification. So the conversation is deep on this Friday. We're getting into it because that's what we're doing. What up, Brandon? Um, but I think it's important because it's a chat that keeps coming up, right? We keep talking about gentrification, right? It's a constant conversation, especially at this point in the market where numbers are just going up. Property values are only going up. Stocks are doing well. Everybody's out here. You're either getting a mobile home, you're doing options. Folks are out here buying property, of course. People buying vending machines. Like everybody's trying to get it right now, which is great. But those types of developments, when people get money on it, honestly, a lot of times they end up buying real estate. And so when they buy real estate, that's going to drive property values up, which spurs a whole bunch of different things. And so again, wanted to talk about first, what is gentrification, right? What is community development? And then bring it around to, can you do both? Like, if you can have both of them, can you? Would you? How do you do that? How do you make that happen? What's up, Doug? Hey, Charm City, Bradley, North Carolina, checking in. What's up? So I have lovely Jasmine here who's been having this conversation. That's why this came up. We were talking in the office and just decided to come in here and go live. So maybe we'll just kick it off by like defining, right? So let's define gentrification. First of all, I think that people use the word wrong. And I think people get mad at me about this, but when we talk about gentrification, like gentrification is so bad and this, that, and the third, gentrification by definition means you're improving a community to middle class standards, period. That's what the word means. So I think when we're talking about gentrification and we're talking about how bad gentrification is, we're not saying that these neighborhoods don't deserve quality housing, access to grocery stores, fresh food, be able to be in walking distance to something other than a liquor store. We're not saying that these neighborhoods don't deserve that. We're saying that we don't like displacement. We don't like people not being able to afford their house anymore, which is a negative impact of gentrification, right? So gentrification isn't bad. There can be negative impacts if the community and folks involved don't have the tools, the resources, or the knowledge to figure out how you navigate those changes, take advantage of the positives and mitigate the negatives, right? And honestly, I think that leads into what community development is, at least to me, right? So community development for me means that you are doing, by definition, right, gentrification. You're improving a community to middle class standards, but you're doing it in a way that is in partnership with current residents. It's in partnership with like the city or wherever you are, right? You have a partnership. There's a collaboration. There's other people at the table. And so you're not just kind of focused on me, but really focused on how do I bring other people to the table to help define the path that I take, right? To me, that's community development. So like when we do stuff, we're always really focused on how do I, first of all, as a for-profit, right? How do I get my numbers and make sure that makes sense, but also add value in the communities in which we invest. That's kind of like how we put it, right? How do you add value in the communities in which you invest? So for us, we do that by getting to know the neighbors, making sure they know what we have going on, what the plan is, connecting with community associations, talking to the city, talking to nonprofits, for-profits, understanding what is the makeup of the neighborhood. So when we talk about like how many vacants are there, especially in Baltimore where we focus, right? What's the ratio from vacants to occupied? housing? What's the ratio between rentals and owner occupied homes? Like, what is this community, right? We don't just like go in and buy a house. We're going to try to figure out what's happening and what's going on around. And so that means like making contacts, building relationships, talking to community association, talking to everybody so that we are like becoming part of the community and not just like popping in and popping out, which again is probably another reason why people don't like gentrification, is because people are making money and then they just leave, right? So we try to figure out how we can really be all in there. What's the deal with some places in Detroit? Boo, I'm in Baltimore. We can talk about Baltimore all you want. I don't know nothing about Detroit. You're going to have to hit up my girl, Asia from Denson Construction Services, Asia Denson. That's your boo for Detroit. You want to talk about Baltimore? I got you. Be more all day, baby. But yeah, so that's the community development and gentrification. What it is, and like by definition, at least from my perspective, what the difference is between the two.
So talk about then what are some negative effects that people like from gentrification that people are having an issue kind of understanding?
Yeah. So like gentrification, what happens is when you go in and you're kind of like speculating, you're going to make your money, which no shade, no foul, right? Everybody has their role. But the negative impacts of gentrification is displacement. It's when you go in and you buy a house, you buy a vacant house for 10 grand and you end up selling it for 250 grand, right? All those houses around that location probably were assessed from a tax value pretty low, right? So if every house is vacant worth 10 grand, let's say the city says this house is worth 10 grand, and therefore I'm going to charge you property taxes on that valuation of the house, right? Of this $10,000. Well, if houses start popping up for 200 grand, they're going to come look at, Auntie Melba's house and say, okay, your house looks like it has risen in property value. And therefore you now have to, you got to pay more taxes, Miss Melba. Like, ain't nobody playing with you. Mm-hmm. And so the problem is that with that, people who have been in the neighborhood for a long time, especially like legacy residents who are older, they may own the house free and clear, but they're on fixed income. And so they have been paying $200 a year for their taxes for the last 20 years. And now all of a sudden, these investors are coming in and flipping houses and raising property values. And that $200 tax bill now turns into a $2,000 a year tax bill. Or the people who have been renting in this neighborhood all of this time have been paying, a really affordable price for rent, but now their landlord has higher taxes. And now that needs to funnel into how much they're paying for rent. And so affordability becomes an issue, right? You start to raise, you raise quality, you raise prices. And when you do that without also coupling it with giving access to, jobs that are paying well, or being able to, make sure as there's market rate housing, that there's also affordable housing options, or even just straight like information, right? So for us, we're like, okay, how do we partner with a nonprofit or somebody in the area that can go door knocking to long-term residents and say, there's things happening, there's development coming, we're excited about it, but here are some things that you can do to protect yourself. So like that's like the homestead tax credit, not only for homeowners, but there's also a renter's homestead tax credit that when property values are increasing, there's credits to help offset that cost so that your or their payments stay relatively the same. And so like, again, like the difference between community development and gentrification a lot of times is just taking the time to connect and collaborate and share and provide access and really think about like the bigger picture and not just the individual house.
Okay, so if you're thinking about other ways to protect yourself, if you are in a space where investors are coming in, how does that help? Like, how does that look?
Yeah, like I think, so whether you own property or not, so one, everybody should be trying to buy their own hood. I think we wait too long and we get reactive and pissed off when people come in and find value in areas that we haven't So that's number one. But if that isn't an option, or even if it is, I think we have to be active on our community association boards. That is huge. Huge. So like here in Baltimore, for example, if I was to try to buy a bunch of properties from the city, or if there was like a major development, or if I want like tax credits, if I want money from the city or the state to do something, the first thing they're going to ask is, what does the community association think? And when gentrification comes and happens, a lot of times when you look at the community association, it no longer looks like the community that's been there for a long time, right? So we kind of like concede power sometimes when things start to change, and then wonder what happened. So I don't care where you are. I don't care what's going on. If there's major development happening, it went through some channels of the city or state, because you get all kinds of money that way. But the community association had to sign off. And a lot of the areas in Baltimore where you've seen a lot of change really fast, and people are pissed off, the first question you asked was like, who's on the community association? And it doesn't look like any of the folks who've lived there. No one that's been on the in the area for a long time is still on the board. So we have to, if you can't participate through like your dollars and financially, you have to participate through your time.
So then that brings me to, how can you participate in community redevelopment if you don't have money?
Yeah, it's definitely
time.
Yeah, it's time. It's community association. I think community association is critical in all of this. Like, they play such a huge role. We're on projects right now where it's, tens of millions of dollars worth of development, and at the head of the table is the community association, right? Like, they drive everything. We can't do anything without them. And so spending that time with them is critical. Figuring out, like, educating yourself on how you can play the game, right? If you can't beat them, join them. Like, you might as well ride the wave. A rising tide raises all ships. You want to be on the right side of that, right? You're not trying to be the Titanic out here. So and to do that, it's educating yourself, it's putting yourself in positions of power, like in the community association. And then it's also like, how do you buy the house next door? How do you help your auntie keep her house? How does everyone put in, she shouldn't be losing her house over $100 water bill, right? Like, how do we kind of really rally around what's important, instead of spending as much time and energy around complaining about what's happening? Like, what's happening in Baltimore, in Detroit, in Cleveland, and all these areas that are shifting really quickly, in Houston. Like, it's already here. Like, the things that you see happening right now have been planned for the last 5 years, and so has the next 5 to 10 years. Everything's planned out, right? Being mad now, you're too late. Like, you should have been mad 5 years ago. So at this point, you have to figure out, how do you best position yourself for the next phase, and that's through participation, whether that be community association or even like city council. Like, if you really get into politics. Or you got to figure out how to buy the houses and keep houses in our name, not sell them to the first person who makes you an offer. That's how you participate, whether you can buy houses or not.
So remember when you're talking about how to truly redevelop a community on your live?
Yeah.
Talk more about that.
So, okay. So part of community development, somebody has to be like the first, right? Somebody has to come in and see an area or a neighborhood and see opportunity. That has been us for the last few years, as being like that leader in a community to kind of come in and set your own comps, and really kind of take the lumps of that process, because setting your own comps means that you have to not only sell a house that's beautiful, but you also have to sell an entire neighborhood and what's coming in that area, which is a lot. So I'm gonna tell you first what community development is not. Community development is not shifting a house from one person to the other and making fake comps on the MLS, right? So this is a little bit shady, okay? I know, and you know that I'm being shady, but I'm saying, like, how you develop community is through doing the work, right? Through doing the renovations, through adding value. The only way to add value to the house, honestly, is by doing work to this house, right? Is to force appreciation, So you're doing renovations to force appreciation and then raise property value, right? Some people will kind of wait on houses around them to force, when they add value and force appreciation, those property values go up. By default, right, houses around that neighborhood are going to raise in property value. What you don't do is just arbitrarily make up numbers and take things on and off the MLS to create your own comps, because that's probably illegal. And that is, again, me being shady, but I'm gonna let that go. Doug, I recommend Asia Denson to reach out and work with your company's sorry, you didn't say that. He's a Black lawyer running for city council in Baltimore, and maybe mutual relationship. Yeah, no, we love connecting with city council members. We have a bunch of city council members that we'll connect with and support when we can. I know there's an election going on right now, so we're definitely supportive of the entire political system, and would love to talk to folks who are running about what they have as priorities, especially in the real estate space, and talk to them about some projects that we have going on. So that's a great connection to make. Appreciate that. So we don't be just buying houses. We out here in the political, we got stuff we got to do. So no problem.
Yeah, so how important is like elections and politics in this? Because a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah. So when you transition from investor to developer, which is one of the big things we've been talking about lately, is how do you transition from focusing on, okay, I'm going to buy this house and these are numbers for this house and I'm going to kind of get in and move on, to development. How do I think about the bigger picture, the bigger community, the bigger neighborhood, the bigger impact? And so in that space, in the developer space, politics are pretty important. Like not just, seen and being seen, which is a lot of politics, right? Making sure people know who you are. But beyond that, like priorities and how they plan on not only thinking about communities and who's lived there and legacy and all that kind of stuff, but growth, right? How do you help community move forward? The politicians have their hand and pulse on how things can shift and change really easily. Like a quick decision can change a lot, right? So for example, there was a dollar house program thing that everybody was talking about in Baltimore. It was a program back in like the 70s, 80s that Baltimore had to sell vacants. They sold them for $1, right? Well, that conversation came back up. You guys might have saw it in Essence magazine like a year or two ago. It likes to pop up randomly again. But that conversation coming back up, and city council kind of like, they actually approved it and said, yeah, we're going to do a dollar house program again. Now, between you and I, like, is that really going to happen? I don't know. Personally, I don't think so, right? Because we're in a completely different space than we were in the 80s. In the 80s, Baltimore City actually gave access to funding for people to do renovations on these houses that were $1, and then you had to actually live in the houses. Today, people are speculative, they want to invest, and the city ain't about to give nobody no loan. So, but them approving it got a lot of people amped up about Baltimore again, right? And so a lot of eyes started to shift to Baltimore, like, oh, I want to buy in Baltimore because I can buy cheap houses. Where do I get a house for $1? That spurs more speculation, like eyes on Baltimore. And people starting to like scoop little things up here and there really shifts things and changes things. And then you have like all the money coming into Baltimore right now to demo houses. So with Baltimore being like a 500, 600,000 person city versus being a 1 million person city 20, 30 years ago, the vacants are vacant because ain't nobody here to live in them, right? So now they're knocking down houses, trying to create green space, trying to create more commercial development. But those types of things, those types of political decisions make big impact in the real estate world and like how things shift and move. And to be a community developer, like you have to understand what all those shifts are and be able to navigate the impacts and, exploit some and then figure out how you can navigate the challenges of others.
Yeah. So basically you can't be just an investor.
You can, but that's all you're doing, right? Yeah, your impact is just as limited as your outlook might be. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like, And again, when we talk about the difference between community development and gentrification, or the negative impacts of gentrification, as an investor, it's hard not to be part and play a part in those negative impacts of gentrification, because you're not thinking that way. I'm buying this house, the number makes sense, I'm gonna flip it, I'm gonna rent it for as much as I can, and do everything as fast as I can. There's nothing wrong with that, because I think everyone has their role, right? But I think when we talk about community development, you have to do and about more, and think about all the players and all the impacts and all the, right? There's more impact, but there's also more responsibility and more challenges, honestly, especially when you're not a nonprofit. So we're running around here doing all this and we're not a nonprofit. So we'll sit at a table with all nonprofits talking about this kind of stuff. And so when you are focus on like social impact as well as your bottom line. So we call it like a double bottom line, right? So we're worried about our bottom line, like the don't gotta be green. But there's a whole other level of what adds value for us, and that's that community development, that's that social impact, that's how many people's and lives are we impacting.
So where do you kind of see, or where does the nonprofits really fall in this process?
They're critically important, especially when you talk about, again, that community development side. How do you do things on a larger level? Because when you are first in a neighborhood and you're not making up comps, you're not making up numbers, again, being shady, you having access to nonprofits, or having nonprofits that are doing that are providing affordable housing, is one thing that's great for legacy residents as prices change, like making sure they can stay in the community, right? Beyond that, there's a role played in kind of bringing the funding that nonprofits are able to attract to help offset costs is always important as well. So nonprofits are a big partner in making everything happen, because they're going to help funnel the channels and bring more people to the table. And Baltimore is like the metropolis for nonprofits. There is a nonprofit for every nonprofit you've ever thought of. And so that can be a challenge, but at the same time, it kind of spurs a collaborative, or you'd hope it spurs a collaborative environment.
Yeah. What are some nonprofits that are really helpful for like community redevelopment in Baltimore that new investors should be connecting with, that you can think of off the top of your head?
Yeah. So I mean, I think some community associations are nonprofits. I think everyone should start there. I think if you're investing in a new area, you need to figure out when their meetings are, and your butt needs to go. Even if you don't participate, you don't say anything, you just sit there and hear what they're talking about and understand what the community's, what their focus is. And honestly, there's a benefit too when you're sitting in that room. If you're doing a big rehab and you know that your people are going to be, you're doing demo work and you know they're going to be piling up stuff in the backyard until you can fill up your dumpster and take it out. If you go and introduce yourself to the community association, they may not call them peoples on you to get you fined, right? So like, it's helpful to have friends in places that matter. So
yeah, what do you always say? Access.
I don't know.
You always say access equals something. Access equals opportunity.
I be saying a lot of
stuff.
I be just talking.
So thank you folks for joining, and then give them some insight if you're a new investor, like what they should be doing and what you hope for them, so that they can continue the work you guys are doing. Yeah, no, I think that if you're thinking about getting investing, I think the best time to invest is always now, right? It probably would have been 5-10 years ago. So the next best time is definitely now, right? So just, YouTube University is great. But always, put yourself in positions to learn, put yourself in rooms with people to learn and connect. You either want to be surrounded with people who want to go where you're headed, or people who have been where you want to go to. So, surround yourself with dope people. We have a free class called Building an Empire. Take it. There's tons of information in there. We're sharing the 4 pillars for success there. For sure, check that out. Doesn't matter where you invest. That class is dope.
You're investing in Baltimore. Baltimore is in your wheelhouse of what you want to accomplish. The Next Gen Accelerator is like no bull. Like people say this kind of stuff and I get it and we ignore them like, yeah, whatever, you're just talking about. When I say Next Gen is really like the spot to be, it's crazy. So definitely check out Next Gen, our Next Gen Accelerator coaching program. You can apply. Applications are open. We're talking to people and going through apps. So definitely check that out. But at the end of the day, like it's just about making a decision and taking action towards it, right? We're over New Year's resolutions. Chances are if you made one, you already broke it. So like, let's just go ahead, decide what we're going to do and make it happen. Let's create the action steps and make it happen. At the end of the day, we talked about like, what's gentrification, what's community development. Can you like do one without the other, right? Can you do community development without spurring gentrification? And by definition, the answer is probably no, right? Your community development is going to raise the access and raise the neighborhood to middle class standards, which is probably a good thing because I think all neighborhoods deserve that, whatever middle class standards actually means. But you have to do some steps to help mitigate some of those negative impacts. And that's how you strike the balance between gentrification and community development.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think you did awesome.
Whoop, whoop. So follow us on all of the spaces, right? At Charm City Buyers, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, charmcitybuyers.com. And then we'll see you at the either free Building an Empire seminar or hopefully if you really about that life in Next Gen. See ya.